Hello all, welcome to this session. In this session, I'm going to answer one of the Java interview questions. That is, what is the difference between for loop and for each loop in Java? Let me answer this question followed by practical demonstration. So what is the difference between the for loop and for each loop in Java? Okay, so we may encounter some situations in the Java programs while writing some Java code. Okay, and there will be kind of situation where whether we have to go for loop in this situation or for each loop. Okay, so that kind of situation generally gets arised. Okay, generally everyone will face it at some point of time. But if you know the differences between this for loop and for each loop, you'll be able to decide which loop we have to use while you are writing that Java code, whether we have to go with the for loop in that case, or whether we have to go with the for each loop in that case. That you will get the clarity once you understand the differences between the for loop and for each loop. First, I'll start the differences between the for loop and for each loop in a different way, but by the end of these differences, right, you'll understand at what point of time you have to use for loop, at what point of time in the code you have to use for each loop. Okay, so let's get started with the differences, guys. Since the question is all about the differences, let's understand the differences between the for loop and for each loop. I'll just put a line here so that I know this side I'll write the for loop, and this side I'm going to write the for each loop. Okay, for each loop, fine. So first let's look into the syntax, guys. Okay, so people call this for each loop also has enhanced for loop. Okay, some people call it as a enhanced for loop, enhanced for loop. Okay, normal for loop and enhanced for loop. This is a general or normal for loop. This part is a general or normal for loop, whereas for each loop is the enhanced for loop. Okay, whereas the normal for loop, it is a normal or general, you can say. Okay, you can say anything, normal or general for loop. Okay, this is a normal or general for loop, whereas the enhanced for loop is nothing but the for each loop. Okay, enhanced for each loop for loop is nothing but the for each loop. That's fine. That's great. Okay, so first thing that you have to understand the differences is the syntax of for loop is different from the syntax of the for each loop. Okay, so what is the syntax? So what is the syntax of the for loop? Okay, for loop will be like this. For keyword will be there, circular brackets will be there, starting of the circular brackets, ending starting of the curly brace, ending of the curly brace, which contains the body. Okay, here inside this we can write multiple statements. Whatever the statements you want to write, you can write it. Okay, here statements you can write. Similarly guys, here also, okay, here also the same kind of syntax may be there. Here also the same thing may be there like this, but internally inside the circular brackets, the difference will be there. Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, just give me a second, I'll tell you. First, let's write the entire syntax of the for loop. After that, I'll explain how the for each loop syntax is going to be different from the for loop. Here also the for keyword will be there. In for each loop also the for keyword will be there. In both the cases, for keyword will be there, circular brackets, starting of the curly brace, ending of the curly brace, and inside this, initialization, then condition. Okay, three sections will be there: initialization, condition, updation. Okay, and here the for loop code will be there. This is the syntax of the traditional for loop or normal for loop or general for loop, guys. Contains three sections: initialization section, condition section, and updation section, separated by the semicolon symbols like this. Okay, then what about the for each loop syntax? How it is going to be different from the traditional for loop? Okay, let's see that here. Okay, coming to the for each loop, which is an enhanced for loop, right? The difference will be something like this. Okay, that is, here for will be there, same thing, curly brace, ending curly brace, and all those stuff. But inside the circular brackets, we don't have this many of sections. Instead, here we have type of the element, some colon, either array or collection. Okay, so like this it will be there, guys. Okay, type, the type of the elements that are stored into the array or collections, like array list or has set. Okay, it can be anything. Okay, hash, map, etc. Type of the elements that are individual elements that are stored into the individual element that are stored into this array or collections on this side. Okay, here we have to give that particular type to iterate through each and every element of this arrays or collections. This is a syntax. By looking at the syntax only, you can clearly understand. Okay, by looking at the syntax, you can clearly understand this. Okay, so for each loop is specially designed for arrays and collections. Whereas traditional for loop is a general for loop, guys, normal for loop. You can use in the normal programming apart from the arrays and collections, and also you can use it with arrays and collections also. This for traditional for loop also you can use with arrays and collections, but for each loop is specially designed for arrays and collections. It's not specially designed. Normal or general for loop can work with arrays and collections, but it's not specially designed. But for each loop is specially designed for arrays and collections that we have in the differences, guys. Okay. Once you understand the syntax differences between the for loop and for each loop, okay, here you see type element colon collection will be there. Okay, so here for initialization, condition, update, 3 sections will be there, and code to run multiple times, or sorry, this is like code to run. Okay, code to run multiple times. Here also code to run for each element. Okay, code to run for each element. That's correct. This is a general purpose iteration, guys. Okay, it's not specially designed. For loop is not specially designed. General purpose means not specially designed for arrays slash collections. It's not specially designed for arrays or collections, but can be used. But can be used with arrays, collections, and other things also. It's not specially designed only for arrays and collections. Okay, but also behind arrays and collections, you can use it anywhere in the programs. Okay, not only for arrays and collections, but a lot of other stuff. You can use a general or traditional for loop. Okay, it's a general purpose used iteration purpose. Okay, general purpose iteration purpose, we can use a traditional for loop. Okay, but it's not specially, though it can work with arrays and collections, but okay, though it's not specially designed, but you can use it. Okay, here I'll write down not specially designed for arrays slash actions, but can be used with arrays, collections, and many other things in Java. Okay, for general iteration purpose. Okay, this is what is a for loop. But what about the for each loop? Cannot be used for general iteration purpose, specially designed for arrays and collections only. Okay, if we have to use a for each loop, you have to use with either arrays or collections framework related predefined classes, etc. Okay, it's specially designed. We cannot use it with elsewhere stuff. Only for arrays and collections, it's specially designed. Whenever a situation comes where you have to iterate through each and every element of an array, or you want to iterate through each and every element of a collection type like array list or hash set or hash map, etc., you have to go with the for each loop as a priority over the traditional for loop. Though for loop also can be used, but for each loop is specially designed. Okay, now understanding that for each loop is an enhanced for loop which is specially designed for arrays and collections with the prospect of arrays and collections, let's understand the difference. What if you use for loop with the same arrays and collections, and what will happen if you use a for each loop with the enhanced for loop with the arrays and collections? That differences we can see. Okay, so that you can understand in which situations we have to use for each loop with arrays and collections, in which situations traditional for loop which can be used with general iteration purpose can also be used with arrays and collections. In which purpose we have to choose, we can decide. Okay, fine. So let's go ahead step by step. By the end of this session, right, with practical demonstration, you will understand the things. Okay, so the next thing here is specially designed for arrays and collections. Okay, will not work with any other stuff. Only for arrays and collections it is designed. Now the actual story starts, guys. Okay, now the actual story starts here. That is, now you understood that you can use for loop with, okay, you can use for loop with arrays and collections. General for loop with arrays and collections you can use. You can also use the for each loop with the arrays and collections. In fact, for each loop is a specially designed loop to work with arrays and collections. But what is the difference, guys? Okay, though both can be used, what will be the difference if I use this traditional for loop or general for loop, which is not specially designed for arrays and collections with this thing, and then specially designed thing for each loop with this arrays and collections? That kind of stuff let's look at. Okay, so can be customized, flexible, full control for arrays and collections, guys. Okay, if you use for loop, you can customize the logic. Customization means flexibility is there, more flexibility. Okay, and full control for arrays and collections. What do I mean? If you want to skip some elements, if you want to skip some elements from iterating, that you can. Okay, skipping elements from iterating in the arrays and collections I'm talking about. Okay, I'm only from here onwards, I'm going to compare the for loop and for each loop with arrays and collections. With both can be used with arrays and collections. This is specially designed for arrays and collections. Why it is specially designed for arrays and collections, you can understand. Okay, there may be some situations where for each loop may not be the thing that you have to use with arrays and collections because of the situation. Okay, so what is such kind of situations where even though for each loop is specially designed for arrays and collections, why you still want to go with the for loop with arrays and collections? I'm talking about the differences here. Okay, so there is a specially designed loop, but still you want to use for loop with arrays and collections. The reason, one of the reason may be because of its customization capability or flexible capability, skipping of the elements is possible. For example, I'll launch Eclipse IDE, guys, and demonstrate that for you. Just give me a second. As you can see, the Eclipse IDE has opened here, launched here. I'll expand this project. And yeah, here I'm going to write down the code. Okay, I'll just create a package like, loops stack. Some package name I'll give and create a new thing, new class with the name for loop demo. Okay, for loop demo, I'll say. I'll say demo one otherwise. Okay, for loop. Multiple examples I have to give you as part of this session, guys. That's why I'm creating all this stuff. For loop demo one, I'll say with the main method, I'll, do that. And here inside this main method, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write a for loop which works with arrays and collections. Okay, let's take one of them. Okay, you don't have to go with all the things like arrays and collections. Let's go with arrays. Otherwise, it will be very simple. I'll create an array, guys. Integer array AR is equal to, like this. I'll create a shortcut representation of the array. This shortcut representation of the array 9, 1, 5, 7, 2, 4, 3, 8. Like this, some elements I gave. That's okay. Okay. Now, how many elements are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I want to iterate all the elements of this array, I can use a traditional for loop, right? It's possible to use a traditional for loop. Int I is equal to 0. I less than the size of the array, AR dot length, I plus I'll write. That's fine. Now here I'll write system.out.println AR of I I'll write. Okay. So if I run this code, all the elements of this array will be printed. You see, 9157, 9157, 2438, 243. All the elements of the array got printed. From starting to the ending, all the elements got printed. But I will say that in this kind of situations where you have to use the general or traditional for loop or normal for loop for iterating through all the elements of the array, I'll say that this is not the best loop here in this case. Okay. If you have to iterate through all the elements of this array, then traditional for loop is not the best choice. Then what is the best choice, guys? What is the best choice? You have to use for each loop. For each and every element of this array. Individually, if you take one of the element in this array elements, if you individually take this element, what is the type of this element, guys? Int type. Okay. Take any element. Okay. Int is the type. And E for element, or you can write E, I, whatever you want. Okay. Here in this case. And after the colon symbol, you have to write the name of the array that you want to iterate through. Okay. You want to iterate through all the elements of the array one by one. Okay. For that, you can simply use for each loop. The simplest loop for iterating through all the elements of an array or collections is not the traditional for loop, but the for each loop. Here I'll write system.out.println simply E, which code is kind of simple. This code looks very simple. This code looks complex. Multiple sections are there. I have to find the size of the array. Then I have to say AR of I and all those stuff. But here in this case, you see how simple it is. You can clearly see the difference, right? The simplest loop that you can use with arrays and collections, framework related classes, etc., is for each loop, not the traditional for loop. If you want to iterate with all the elements of the array, then for each loop or enhanced for loop is the best choice. In this case, I'll generally go with the for each loop. But what if using this enhanced for loop, is it possible for me to only iterate from only this 15724 I want? That's it. 15724. Only this 5 elements I want. I want to skip 9, 3, and 8. Is that possible with the help of for each loop? That is not possible. That's what I tell. That's what I say about the flexibility and customization is not possible in the for each loop. Again, the traditional for loop, the same traditional for loop we have to use for int 0, 1, 2, right? I want to start with, I want to start like this, right? This 5 elements I want, 1, 2, 4 I want, 1, 5, 7, 2, 4 I want. That means I should not start with 0, right? Int I is equal to 0, I should not start. What I will do, int I is equal to 1. Okay, int I is equal to 1, I will say. Then I less than what? Till where I want to go. From I is equal to 1 to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Till 5. I less than or equal to 5, you can say. I plus plus. Okay. I don't want to go till the end. I just want to go from 1 to 4 here. 3 and 8, I don't want. 9, I don't want. Okay. This kind of customization of skipping some elements that I don't want to access and only elements that I want to iterate. That is only possible with the traditional for loop or normal or general for loop, guys, which is not possible in the case of for each loop, which will iterate with all the elements of the array. Okay. So here I'll write down AR of I. Now see here, only 1 to 4 will be printed. Okay. 1, 5, 7, 2, 4 will be printed, not all the elements. The same thing if you want to get the output with the help of for each loop will not be possible. Now understood, guys? In which situations, which loop we have to use? When coming to the arrays and collections, you can use both the loops, but for loop has to be used when you want to skip some elements. Only few elements you want to be iterated. Okay, this same thing. Skipping elements are only few elements to be iterated. In that kind of, if you don't want to iterate with all the elements, okay, then I would do like this. If you want to iterate in reverse, then also for each loop is not for you. Traditional for loop only you have to use. If you want to iterate iterate the elements in an array in a reverse format, you have to use the for loop only, guys. For each loop, there is no possibility. This for each loop, the straightforward way it will iterate. It will not be able to iterate in a reverse way. So how to use this traditional for loop so that it can iterate back? For int I is equal to AR dot length minus 1, I'll say. Okay, last element has the size of the array minus 1. That's why I gave like this. Then I'll write I greater than or equal to 0. Then I minus minus I'll say. This kind of customized logic is not possible with the for each loop to iterate back. I want to start retrieving the elements of this array using this traditional for loop from reverse way. That is, first 8 should come, then 3, 4, 2, 7, 5, 1, at the last 9 should come. In such kind of cases, you have to write this kind of customized logic if you want to write. Then for each loop is not for you, guys. For each loop is not for you. Run this code and see that 8, 3, 4, 2, 7, 5, 1, 9. You see, I was able to iterate through these array elements in a reverse format. Okay, these are several examples, guys, I am giving. Why traditional for loop is better over for each loop, even in case of arrays and collections. Even though for each loop is specially designed for arrays and collections, still we have to prefer for loop in some situations. Besides, we have to use for each loop only for simplicity purpose, because for each loop looks very simple, but the only condition is that if we have to use for each loop over for loop with arrays and collections, we have to make sure that we are iterating through all the elements of the array or collections, that too in a not a reverse manner, in the straightforward manner. In such cases, only for loop. Other cases, for loop is still preferable for the arrays and collections also, though it's not specially designed for that. Okay, fine. Then, okay, here in this case of for each loop, complete iteration should be there. Then only we can go with the for each loop. Okay, and only for arrays and collections it is possible to use for each loop. We cannot use for loop with arrays. We cannot use for each loop with any other stuff. Okay, specially designed for kind of stuff. Okay, then the next thing here is complete. Every element need to be iterated. That is complete iteration. Hence, no customization is possible here. Okay, and you want to do something like this. This kind of cases also. For example, I don't want to print all the elements of this array. I just want to print the elements which are at the even index. at the even index. For example, 0. 0 is the even index. I want 9 to be printed. Then 1 is the index. Odd index I don't want to print. Then even index 5 after 9. 0, 1, 2. 2 is the even index. Again this one. 4, 6. Only the even indexes if I want to. By skipping the remaining elements, only the even index if I want to print, I'll do like this. Int I is equal to 0. I less than. Okay. Then I can do like this. Okay. I can do something. I less than ar dot length. I plus. I'll not say I plus 1. I plus plus. I'll not say I plus 2. I'll say. Okay. So that index will be like that. Okay. System dot out dot println. Or we can do one thing. Int I is equal to 0. Okay. I for every time I want to increment the value of I by 1 means same thing will happen. Okay. I plus is equal to 2. Let's write like this. Okay. Like this we can write. Fine. I plus is equal to 2. System dot out dot println. Let's see what is going to happen. AR of I, I'll say. So in this case, only the even position element should come. 9523. 9523. You see, even position array elements got printed. So skipping of the elements is possible with the help of customization of the for loop, which is not possible with the for each loop. And if you want to remove the elements by adjusting the index, then again you have to go with the traditional for loop. For example, if you go with the array list, let's say, okay, I'll just create one more class here. In this case, I'll have to go with the collections, one of the collections framework related classes like array list, etc. I'll write like this array list demo1. Okay. Finish some collection framework thing you have to go and here create an object for the array list. Array list a list is equal to new. Otherwise, you can also write like this. List is equal to new array. Most of the people write the code like this. That's the reason I'm choosing this format. And here I'll write down. Integer. Let's say integer. Here I'll write down less than greater than symbol. Over the mouse. Import the elements. Import. Okay. Now I want to add some elements into this array list. That is, I'll simply say list dot add of. I'll say 9. Then list dot add of let's say 7. Then list dot add of let's say 5. Then list dot add of let's say 8. Like this 4 elements I added, guys. I want to remove one of the element like 5 here. Okay. So if I use for each loop to remove the element, what will happen? Let's see. Okay. Okay. So what I will do here is let's see what will happen. Okay. If I try to remove a particular element and fine. So let's go with the for each loop. For each and every element in this array list is of which type? Integer type. Integer I'll write. Integer e colon list I'll write. Okay. Then system dot out dot println. I'll simply say e. All the 4 elements of the array will be printed without any problem. Run this code. You say 9758 got printed. If you want to access all the elements of the array, that's okay. Now I'm going to do one thing like remove. Okay. So I'll write some logic here. Okay. Before printing, I would like to, after printing, I would like to create a logic here that if that element is greater than, otherwise element is less than, I'll say anything you can, less than 6, then write down list dot remove. Dot this kind of some customized logic I'm writing, guys. Okay, like this I'll write the logic. If the element is less than 6, you see 9 is greater than 6, so it will not be removed. 7 is not less than 6. 5 is less than 6, so this number need to be removed. Remaining 8 also is not less than 6. Only in this case of 5 it has to be removed. But what happens here is, so it feels like only 5 will be removed and the iteration will continue and all those stuff you may think. But what is going to happen? Let's run this code and see. Okay, 957. But what about 8? What about 8, guys? What happened to 8? So 975 got, then we are saying remove e, right? If E is less than 6, then remove E means, you see, the problem is with the next element, okay? The next element is getting removed. What's going on here? I am not getting the proper output, right? Here, what should happen, guys? As per this iteration, what should happen? First, 9 should be printed, then 9 is not less than 6, so it not be. The next iteration, 7 will be assigned here, 7 will be printed, 7 is neither less than 6, so fine. Again, the next element, 5 is less than 5, 5 will be printed here. After that, 5 is less than 6 is true, it has to remove the 5 actually. It has to remove the 5 from this list, and the 8, and the next iteration, 8 should be assigned and 8 should be printed, okay? That's what should happen in the next thing after doing this thing, right? If I print this list here, see what is going to happen. 9, 7, 8 are coming. It got removed, but ultimately it's printing only 9, 7, 5, but it has to also print 8. What is the problem that 8 has done? I'm worrying about removing the 5 here, but it is removing the 8 here. Not removing, it's removing the 5 only, but it's not iterating with 8. Some kind of problem is there in this program, if you can clearly observe is, okay, 9, 7, 5, and 8 should be printed here. But after that, when I print this list, the without that with that removed element, the list should be coming. But here the iteration is not working properly, right? 9, 7, 5, 8 should come. Here 8 is coming means here also 8 should come. But what is happening here? It's not removing. It's because of this remove method. This 8 is, you see, indexing problem is there, guys. Okay, index is not getting adjusted here. In this case of traditional, in this case of for each loop, indexing won't be adjusted. Once you remove the element, okay, once you remove the element, what will happen? This 8 will go into this index position. This 8 will go into this index position, and because of which it's not able to find the next element and all, it's completing the loop. It's thinking that only 3 elements are there. I have already removed the third element. Like that kind of situations are coming here, okay? So that's what is the problem, guys, okay? Sometimes, for example, you can do like this also, okay? What will happen in this case? Let's see. What if I print this statement here and run this code? Let's see what is going to happen. 9, 5, 7 are coming. Again, 8 is not coming. Okay, the same problem we are facing, right? 9, 5, 7 it's printing, but 9, 7, 5 it's printing. Even after removing 5 also it's printing, guys. Okay. So what kind of stuff is going on here? This loop is not working fine. So in this kind of loop, in place of this, what if I use traditional for loop? Will that work fine? Int I is equal to 0. I less than size of the list dot size. Then I plus plus. Here I'll write the same logic, guys. No difference at all. I'll write the same logic, that is if I is. Here I'll write the logic system.out.println, system.out.println. I'll print it out like, I'll print it out something like what I can print. I'll print something like list.get of I. And here if if list.get of I is less than 6, then list.remove, I'll say list.remove. Here also you may get the same output, but let's see what is going to happen. List.remove of index I, okay? Index I, whatever the element that is there at the index I need to be removed, okay? Like this I'll use and run this code. Let's see what will happen, and after the output we'll decide. You see 975, same output is coming here also. But what if I say, after removing, I'll say I minus I, whatever it is, you can write, run this code. You see, this is working fine. Even after removing it, okay, it's able to get 8. This was not possible in case of the for each loop, but with traditional for loop, removing operation is working properly. Okay, what if I put this print statement here? So this kind of possibility of decrementing the value of index, adjusting the index after removing the element is only possible with the traditional for loop, not with the for each loop. That's why, that's the reason, guys, you're getting a proper output and all those stuff. Okay, so there's another problem that is happening, printing something after I minus and all those stuff is something different is happening. That's okay. But ultimately, when you are printing like this, you are getting a proper output. Okay, you're removing, but you are not worried about not printing it. Okay, in this traditional for loop here, you see 9, 7, all the elements of the list came here, but it got removed in the next line. When you print list without that removed element, we are getting this is the proper output we want to get. If you want to get this kind of output, we cannot use a for each loop in this case. We have to use a traditional for loop only. So guys, these are the things. Okay, if you want to explain in detail, these are the things I want to. give or show you like you see, for each loop is specially designed for arrays and collections. For loop is not specially designed, but can be used. But ultimately, there will be some situations coming to you in real time in case of the same arrays and collections, okay, where we have to go with the for loop instead of the for each loop. Not always you have to use for each loop with arrays and collections. Sometimes you have to use for loop also. If you want the flexibility with arrays and collections, still for loop is the best choice. Okay, if you want the simplicity and if you want to iterate with all the elements without worrying about anything, then for each loop is the best loop for arrays and collections. Okay, so with practical demonstration, I've answered this question for you guys. So that's all for this session. Thank you. Bye bye.